Welcome to the Web Development Technologies course. In this course, we'll be addressing all that you need to know about website development. First, we'll be addressing the types of development that we have. You've probably heard of front-end development, back-end development, but what are they? What is a full-stack developer? And what do you need to become one kind of developer? In this course, we'll be diving in to details like these so you can identify your career path that you want to take, as well as the knowledge that you need to gain to become one. We'll be addressing what front-end development is. For website development particularly, we'll be discussing the technologies that you need to know to become a front-end web developer. For example, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There are frameworks that are created to simplify our work that are used for front-end development like Bootstrap, AngularJS, jQuery, and many more. In this course, we'll be covering such frameworks as well, their latest versions, as well as the advantages that they have. We'll also be looking at back-end development as well for websites. The same will be dealt with, what it is, the technologies that are used, for example, PHP, Ruby, Python, and many more. Frameworks that are used to simplify our integration and use of these technologies, such as Laravel, Cake PHP, and many more. We'll be dealing with the latest information regarding these technologies and frameworks, just so we're up to date with how technology is trending. Finally, we'll deal with full-stack development. Why do you need to become a full-stack developer? Maybe because you have the keys to the whole house? We'll find out what that means, the advantages of full-stack web development, as well as choosing a development stack. That is, which technologies or frameworks you need to use for a particular project, for your front-end, back-end, and many more, regarding on how large your project is and what you need to handle in your project. Let's start with all of these in the next videos. In this video, we'll be dealing with the technology stack for web development. What is the technology stack? The technology stack is comprised of both front-end and back-end development. Let's find out what these terms mean. Front-end development, which is also known as client-side development, is developing the part of your website that the user sees and interacts with on a daily basis. For example, the links, the images they see, the text, the buttons, etc. Adding those components is done by using front-end development. Most static websites use this approach as only the interactive part of the website is created. There's not much logic involved. Let's make an example, creating a personal website. Some personal websites are quite simple, like the one I have created. You just have your images to describe yourself and text. You have your resume that could be downloadable using links. You have tables and many more. Those have been sufficient to put together a portfolio of my skills and a lot more information that I needed. Creating static websites or front-end development requires the use of technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We'll describe these in the next section. But in summary, HTML is responsible for actually putting the components on your website. CSS is used to style those components so that it looks a lot better. JavaScript, on the other hand, is used for more advanced animations. We'll have a look at these later. Next, we're having a look at back-end development. Back-end development is also known as server-side development. This involves creating the logical part of the website that the user doesn't see, like connecting to databases. Databases are components that we use to store our information. Methods and data manipulations as well. For example, the information that is retrieved. Say your website is a blog, and you have a database to store all comments on your blogs. Then, backend development will be required to retrieve that information from your database and display it on your website. Backend development is incorporated to create dynamic websites. Dynamic websites, unlike static websites, are websites that could change based on the information that was pulled from the database. We did indicate that databases store information. For example, Facebook. Facebook is a dynamic website because it pulls information differently based on the statuses and posts that people have added. We can use technologies that use SQL like PHP, Ruby, and more that we'll have a look at later. Finally, the full stack. Full stack web development involves being fluent in both front-end and back-end technologies. That is, being able to handle the interface that the person interacts with on a daily basis and being able to handle the back-end that involves data manipulation and more. Being a full-stack web developer is convenient because you can develop websites that require the whole stack. And this is an on-demand skill because usually people are able to do complete projects on their own as they can handle both front-end and back-end development based on what the project requires. Next, we'll have a look at the technologies and frameworks for front-end and back-end. We also have full-stack frameworks that we can use that incorporate all of them in one. In this lecture, we'll be discussing HTML, which is our hypertext markup language. HTML is the backbone of every website. That means that every website that we interact with on a daily basis is built on HTML. Markup languages describe how a website should look like, as opposed to a programming language, which describes what the code must do. HTML dictates the components that we have on our website. For example, the text, the images, buttons, links, tables, navigation bars, and many more. Those are on our website because of the HTML that we added to our file. HTML uses the .html extension for its files. So every file with the .html extension has the code to display contents on a website. Our latest version of HTML is HTML5. This is a standard supported by numerous browsers, although not all functionalities of HTML5 are supported. For example, we have HTML5 videos. There were issues agreeing on which particular extension of videos to use, so several browsers use the different video extensions. But HTML5 is the base standard for all the browsers for most content. HTML5 was developed to improve compatibility between browsers. For example, HTML4, which is the prior version of HTML, would require plugins to display some content on the website. HTML5 has reduced the use of plugins because of its general compatibility between browsers. HTML5 also has additional elements for page management. This is not a technical course, but we will discuss some basic code for HTML, as this usually forms the backbone of a large percentage of websites in website development. An element is a component that we use to add items on our page, for example, paragraphs, buttons. We use what we call elements. It has additional elements such as sections, footers, and more. Let's have a look at the basic code of an HTML page. The basic structure of HTML code is as described here. First, you can identify HTML by the angled brackets. These angled brackets form what we call tags. A tag is made up of what we call an element, which is the text within the angled brackets and the angled brackets themselves. This, in general, is called a tag. We have opening and closing tags. Some tags are self-closing. Some are not, like the HTML tag. We have some tags that are self-closing, which do not go in pairs. We've learned about the advantages of HTML, HTML5, which is the latest version. Let's now learn about CSS. In this video, we learn about cascading style sheets, also known as CSS. CSS is a simple design language that handles the look and feel of websites. It works with HTML, a markup language, to improve how it looks by the use of styles, such as background colors, font faces, font sizes, background images, and a lot more styles that it applies. It has a wider variety of attributes to improve the look and feel. For example, we have what we call attributes that we can use to describe HTML elements that we discussed in the previous lecture. You can use attributes to define how those elements look. But with CSS, a lot of attributes can be used to improve how your website looks. CSS also simplifies development. Let's make an example. There are 3 ways of adding CSS to your HTML code. You can use what we call external CSS, that is creating an external CSS file and linking to your HTML page. You can use what we call internal CSS, which you use within your HTML pages, and inline CSS. Inline CSS is defined for every single element in your HTML page. Say your website has 10 titles, 4 images, 3 paragraphs, and more components. Using inline CSS would be tedious, as you'd have to describe the style for every single element individually. While the use of internal and external CSS simplifies development because you can use a single style to apply to several other elements. We'll make a simple example next. Only because CSS and HTML form the core of our website development, simple code snippets will be showed of how you can identify CSS code. Let's discuss CSS3. CSS3 is the latest version of CSS. As with HTML5, these just form a standard of the use of CSS and HTML. It comes with improved functionalities to aid development, such as vendor prefixes. Vendor prefixes allow better compatibility. In case your CSS doesn't apply as expected, you can specify the prefix for a particular browser vendor and observe how the CSS applies to that particular scenario. CSS3 also comes with the availability of more styles, like rounded borders. Adding content to columns is now easier by the use of simple attributes. You can add multiple backgrounds to your website and a lot more functionalities. So CSS3 is simply just a standard that we currently use now in development. Basically, we're still using CSS, but CSS3 is just the latest version/standard. Let's have a look at example code for CSS. We mentioned that we have external CSS, which is linking to an external CSS file and linking it to your HTML page. The first example, where we are styling the paragraph, is an example of external CSS. Only that can be located in your external CSS file, which will help change the color of your paragraph to blue and the font size to 12 pixels. And then we have what we call internal CSS. Internal CSS is added within your HTML page. So instead of creating a separate CSS file, you can simply use your style element. Remember, we said this is an HTML element. You can simply use your style element and then provide the CSS code within. So this is just a basic example of CSS code. When you start developing your websites, you'll get to do this a lot more often. Let's meet again in the next video. In this video, we have a look at JavaScript. JavaScript is the third core language that is used in web development. It comes after HTML and CSS. You'll get to realize that these three languages stack very well on top of each other. HTML is used to put content on your page. CSS is used to style HTML by making it look better. But what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a programming language that is used to achieve more dynamic functionalities on your page. It brings a lot more functionality like real-time updates on your website, animations. You are able to store information that you obtain for your pop-ups, and you can perform more complex functions. Although JavaScript is not exclusively a client-side or front-end technology, that's where it's mostly used, but it can also be used for server-side development. JavaScript uses the .js extension for its files. You can create a separate JavaScript file to put your JavaScript code as we can with CSS, or you can simply add your JavaScript using the script element in your HTML. You can add it in your body or in your head. It will be identified when your browser processes your HTML document. You've probably heard of EMCA script if you're not a beginner developer. But what is it, and how does it differ from JavaScript? EMCA script is just a standard for scripting languages. The same way we have standards for CSS, HTML, we also have standards for scripting languages. The 2017 version is the most stable release that we have. As we said, standards bring more functionality to our existing languages. For EMCA script, we have string padding, that is increasing more space within your text, async functions, and more. We won't dwell a lot on these technical terms for the sake of our beginner developers. But a function in general is a section of a program that is used to perform a particular task, and it has a name. So you can use it if you want to repeat a sequence of tasks or to do a lot more like return values. Let's have a look at some example code. We said you can add your JavaScript as an external file. The first example is how you link to your external file. You use the script element and specify the src. The src is an attribute that we use to specify a path or file name. So it means we have a file name called myjavascript.js. Then in your separate myjavascript.js file is where you can put your JavaScript code. For example, we have a function like we said that's called update name. You have a variable called name. We said with JavaScript you can also store some important information to use for your website. This particular code will just create a pop-up that says enter your name, where you can type your name. But we haven't really done anything with the name. The last example performs the same task, but we've just changed the way of adding the JavaScript to our page. This script element is used in the head or body sections. This is where you specify your JavaScript code instead of specifying it in a separate file. With JavaScript, you can perform a lot more functionality, like adding pop-ups to your website, updating your buttons, your headings, images, adding elements, or even removing them in real time without having to refresh your page. This is one of the most important uses of JavaScript. So in summary, this is how it all works. You use your HTML to put elements on your page, your text, your buttons, your images, and many more. You use HTML to put elements on your page, your text, your links, your buttons, your images. Then you use CSS to style the way they look, add borders to your buttons, add a larger font size to your text. Then, with JavaScript, we can change how your page behaves. When you click a button, what happens? I update the title of my page. I add the name of the user to my website for it to be a bit more custom. That's all we have for this video. Let's discuss the frameworks that are available for us to use so that we can use the CSS, HTML, and JavaScript more easily. In these videos, we're just going to have a brief demonstration of the three technologies that we talked about: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What I have here is my Sublime text editor. To know how to set up for your very first project, then please refer to my course, Introduction to Responsive Websites, HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap 4. Let's create a file called index.html where we're going to write our HTML code. Let's save this open file, save as. Let's save this in a folder called example and name it index.html. To start with our HTML code, we need the backbone code we discussed in the HTML lecture. When you type HTML, your Sublime text editor will populate the basic HTML DOM for you. The HTML5 declaration, head, body, titles. Let's just say the title is Web Tech. And then in your body, let's add what we call a header, an H1 heading. This is just an example of HTML. We'll see how CSS works. Then JavaScript. Web development technologies. Then add what we call an HR. So this is what we call an element. The body, the H1 is an element. Everything within the angled brackets is an element, as long as there's no further information. But when we provide more information within the angled brackets, those are then called attributes. So our tag is our element with the opening and closing brackets. We have our HTML closing our HTML, body closing your body. Everything for HTML should be within your HTML tags. Let's add a few buttons. HTML, and then just copy these and add two more, just for the sake of demonstration, and save. Let's have a look at how this looks. This will be our basic HTML page. Here we are. We have our web development technologies, our HR, and our buttons. Next, let's have a look at how CSS works. We'll use internal CSS by adding the style tags. Within our head section, let's specify a different font type for our heading and the background color of our page. We need to provide the selector, which we call H1. We want to style H1 and therefore we'll use that. We want to change the font family. Let's just use Calibri. That's a common font. Okay, let's just change the font. Let's just change the font type for the H1 heading. And then let's also style the body. We want everything to be centered. We want the background to be blue. So let's just change the background color. Let's use sky blue for now. Let's add styles for our buttons. Let's use the button selector to change the width. Let's just give it 100 pixels and then give the height, let's give it 50 pixels. Let's change the text for our buttons to different names. Let's name this one JavaScript. Let's save. Let's just refresh. This is how our website now looks. We've been able to change how our font looks, the background, as well as the sizes of these buttons. Finally, let's add JavaScript to our website. Usually, you can treat your buttons to behave like links so that they work anywhere you want. But in this particular case, we want all of our content to display on our page. First, let's get a paragraph of text that we'll use in our demonstration. I already have text copied here, so let me just create a paragraph. Let's add a break to separate our elements, and then add the paragraph. I already have text copied, so I'll just go ahead and paste it there to add a paragraph of text. Let's save this and then add our JavaScript after. There's some little text on our website. Let's just add JavaScript. Remember, we said to add JavaScript, you need to specify the script tag. We won't be using an external file, so we'll be using it the same way we used our CSS. Let's create a function. And then provide the name of the function. Let's call it update name, like we did in our example, and give it no argument. Within our function, let's just add a pop-up to take your name. Let's then update a particular element on our website. For example, we want to update this paragraph every time something is clicked. So let's give this paragraph what we call an ID, so we can use that ID in our JavaScript to identify the particular paragraph. We want our ID to be paragraph. So let's go ahead and update our JavaScript. This is an example of how to update an element. You use document .get element by ID. Then you open brackets and specify that particular ID, which is paragraph, in quotes. Then dot to add whatever you want to do. We want to change the inner HTML of this text to something different after we get our name. So let's say dot inner HTML is equal to, let's change the text to hello, then add the variable name, which is outside quotes, and then add more text. Then you have to add a plus again, and then put our quotation strings to put more text. Hello, our text will read hello, and then the name inputted. Let's add a break here so that it adds a new line. You can put tags within your quotation marks and they'll still be interpreted as proper tags. This is a JavaScript text demo. Let's break this again. So we would expect, and then close this with a colon. We would expect that upon clicking this button, our paragraph will now remove this text and update it to this particular text we've specified. First, we have to add an event to a button by using a method we call onClick, and then specify the particular function. In this case, it will be update name, and then the brackets. Let's save this and see how it behaves. Refresh our page and then click our HTML button. We have our pop-up. Let me type in my name. Looks like it didn't change our text. We might have an error somewhere. Let's try to fix it. First, let's have a look at our function. Document.getElementById. That should be a small d over there so that it's blue. Let's save and then see how it works now. Then click OK. They changed our text to Hello Jennifer. This is a JavaScript text demo. You can do more with JavaScript than just changing text. You can add more elements. You can change the styles of existing elements. Let's just demonstrate adding a CSS style in this particular case. Noting that we did not have to refresh our website in order for this text to change. We can add another function. Let's call it update color. No space in the function name. Let's just change the color without any prompt this time. We still use document.getElementById. So let's give our body an ID of body that we'll use in our JavaScript. Let's use body. And then instead of inner HTML this time, we're using style. And then we specify the property we want to change, which is the background color. We just use background, then color. Then is equal to, in quotes, let's specify the color name. And then close this with a semicolon. Now let's call our function for the CSS button and use the onClick and use the update color button. Make sure your case as well as your spellings are correct because it might not work as expected. Let's just save. It looks like we have an error here. Let's just use this as color. You can just Google a list of properties that you can use with JavaScript to update your website. Let's refresh. HTML, our pop-up is still working. We type in our name, click OK. It updates the text. You click your CSS button. It changed the style of your website. In general, these are all that you can achieve with all these languages and a lot more. This is just a basic introduction on what you can achieve with these technologies. In this video, we're going to have a look at the Bootstrap framework. We won't be writing any code for the rest of the frameworks that we have. We'll just be discussing what they are, how they work, what you can achieve with them, the latest versions, as well as the advantages. This is the home page for Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a front-end framework that you can use to develop your websites. It comes with custom-made CSS and HTML styles that help you in developing your websites more easily. It is mostly used for responsive web design. This is where we focus on your website being able to cater for different device sizes and adjusting automatically regardless of the size of the device that you're using. Bootstrap uses the existing HTML elements and CSS styles and extends them to provide you with custom styles that you can use easily. For example, styling buttons, creating tables that are also responsive, creating grids, containers, and a lot more that you can do with HTML, but is a lot more simplified in Bootstrap because of the custom-made styles that they already have. The latest version that we have for Bootstrap is Bootstrap 4, currently running 4.1.3. There are a few changes on Bootstrap 4, like non-support for Internet Explorer 8, 9, and iOS 6. You also have your global font adjusted from 14 to 16 pixels that they use for text. It has also added responsive spacing and sizing as well. There are several ways of adding Bootstrap to your website. You can either download the files or you can use a Bootstrap CDN. A Bootstrap CDN allows you to connect through the internet to the precompiled files. CSS, JavaScript, for example. It focuses primarily on front end, so this means it handles mostly the display of your website, making it look a lot cooler. You can explore the Bootstrap website. There's a lot of information that you can use to start deploying your first Bootstrap project. They have examples that you can use, as well as downloading source code that you can use for your website to get the custom layouts and components that you'd like to use. That's all we have for Bootstrap. Let's discuss other frameworks next. In this video, we're going to have a look at AngularJS. AngularJS is a JavaScript-based open-source front-end frameworks. Remember, we said that front-end frameworks deal with what the client usually sees on your website and not the back-end logic. In the previous framework, we indicated that Bootstrap requires knowledge of HTML and CSS, as it already has templates that rely on those particular languages. AngularJS, on the other hand, relies on all three: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Remember, we said JavaScript allows for dynamic websites so that you can update your website or web page without having to refresh that particular page. This is where dynamic web applications come in, as we discussed in the JavaScript lesson. AngularJS extends HTML to present dynamic content. It also allows for invention of HTML tags that can be handled by JavaScript. This is the AngularJS website. It describes everything that you need to know about AngularJS, why use it, alternatives, and a lot more information that you need. The link to the website is added to the resources section so that you can access it from there easily, just like we did with the Bootstrap links. We're not handling the code, but I'm just explaining how to add AngularJS to your website. Remember, we said to add Bootstrap, you can connect to a CDN, which is online, or download the files that you need. That's the same case with AngularJS. You need to connect to a particular script. Remember, adding JavaScript, we use scripts. So you need to connect to an online script, or you can download the JavaScript files onto your laptop and then use it from there. AngularJS is the very first version of Angular, which is version 1. Since then, there have been a lot of developments to AngularJS. The latest version drops the JS and uses the latest version prefix, version 6. That's the most stable version. These are complete rewrites of the AngularJS and bring a lot more advantages. There's a link on the original website for AngularJS to lead you to the newer version of Angular. This is where you get all the updated information regarding the use of Angular. We have several examples to use, how to get started, docs, resources, installations, and many more. AngularJS is great because it helps your project become maintainable because of the structure that it provides. It also uses existing languages, JavaScript like we mentioned, so it's easier to learn if you already have the basics. Let's discuss another framework in the next video. In this video, we'll be dealing with databases and web service. We indicated that back-end web development includes manipulation of data, its storage, configurations for servers to be able to host the websites that clients are currently seeing, the websites that we use front-end development to come up with. Let's have a look at all the logic that happens in the back end that help users' experience become better. Let's discuss a database. We indicated that for dynamic websites to come into play, then we need some form of information to be retrieved from an external source. Databases can be used to store such information. A database is a collection of data that is stored electronically and organized for easy access. We'll use electronically in this case because we're using computers. Otherwise, data can also be stored on paper and other means. We use SQL, which is called a structured query language, to access and manipulate data on a database, storing, retrieving, modifying, etc. Data is stored in related tables so that it is better organized. For example, you could have a table of login information and have a table of user information, which are all related using a username. The first table is the table which has login information, and then the second table has information about that particular user. A database can be comprised of several more databases which are usually linked for better access. Let's move on to another trend in technology that we use in web development for storing data. It's called JSON. JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. This is simply just syntax or file format for storing and exchanging data. The data in this file is written in human-readable language, which makes it easier to manage. This means that you can store your information within this file that we call a JSON file and then retrieve it from within your website. Data in JSON files can be converted to JavaScript objects and then retrieved using JavaScript. This makes it easier because once you already have the knowledge for JavaScript, then you can simply just retrieve information from that. But JavaScript is not the only language you can use to get data from JSON. You can parse the JSON file into several other scripting languages like Perl, Java, Python, and a lot more other languages that you'd like to use. Information can be stored in databases or JSON files with different formats. You can use strings, numbers, Boolean values, and a lot more data formats to store your information. Let's have an example of a JSON file. You have your variable of users. In this particular case, we stored the information that's on the user table. You provided your name, your surname, and your age. So you can create an array or a group of those elements that you want to put in your JSON file, depending on how much data you have. It's quite simple because of the human readable language and the fact that you do not need to learn SQL to manage this particular file. You can simply just type in text into it once you have a particular format. Let's move on to web service. We mentioned that backend development doesn't only involve data manipulation, but servers and server configurations as well. We have what we call a web server. This is when a particular software or hardware is dedicated to serving components for the web, for example, websites. This particular hardware will serve or provide information with regard to websites. It processes data that works over HTTP and HTTPS, which are the protocols that we use for website access. There are several examples from different vendors of web servers that we can use, like Apache, IIS, and Jinx. You have these particular applications running on your laptop or a dedicated server which handles a larger load. Apache is one of the most commonly used web servers. For more information, you can refer to my course on Introduction to Responsive Websites, HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap 4 on how to set up your environment to use this particular web server and start with your web development projects. Let's have a look at the technologies or languages that you can use in the next videos. Hi, in this video, we're going to discuss PHP. We're currently dealing with back-end web development technologies. PHP is a hypertext preprocessor. It's a scripting language that is used for web development and can be embedded into HTML. As with JavaScript, CSS, and other languages, there's a way to add PHP to your website. In this case, it uses start and end processing instructions, as opposed to the script tag that we used for JavaScript and the style tag that we used for CSS. To be able to write PHP code, you need your file to be saved with a .php extension. However, your .php file will still contain all the HTML content that we had initially. This is just so the script is executed and then parsed into your HTML for display. One thing to note with PHP is not to use the style tag since there will be a misfunction. Rather, use an external CSS file or internal CSS. PHP runs on the server side, parses the results, and then generates HTML to display to the client, as opposed to the front-end languages that are processed by the browser and then displayed to the client. PHP does more than just display text. It can output images, computations, and a lot more functionality depending what your script does. PHP is used for database connections. The websites I have here are the documentation sites for PHP that will get you started. Remember, connecting to a database is one of the ways to get a dynamic website, where you'll be pulling information from an external source. This is an example of a PHP function that you can use to connect to your database. For more information, don't hesitate to visit the sites that I've provided links to as resources for this particular lesson to learn more about the technology. The advantage of using a JavaScript is that because it is processed on the server side and then the result passed into your HTML, it's not easy for the client to view the source code to see what the script actually does. There was a buzz around PHP 5. But PHP 5 isn't the current version. The current stable version is PHP 7. PHP 5 just brought some important updates like improved OOP support, PDO extension. PDO is an object that you can use for accessing database easily, as with ODBC functions that I have open here on my website. PHP 7 also brought cool functionalities like improved behaviors for other methods. It dropped support for some constructors in PHP 4, however, but there are a lot of bugs that were fixed, including bugs that involved switches. For more information, refer on the links that I've provided for you with regard to PHP, how to get started, downloads, and a lot more that you'd like to learn. In this video, we're going to have a look at Python. Python is one of the programming languages that is loved for its readability, as it often uses English keywords, punctuations, and a lot more. You use fewer lines of code to achieve what is necessary, as opposed to other languages like Java, for example. Python is also executed on the server side, like we mentioned with PHP, unlike JavaScript, CSS, the front-end languages that we mentioned. You need to install Python's interpreter to be able to run Python on your website. It uses the .py extension. This is the official Python website. It has a lot of information that you can use to get started. You have your About page that describes what Python actually is, why you should use it, and how to use it. We have the Downloads page. We indicated that first you have to download and install the Python interpreter for you to be able to run Python code on your website. Unlike JavaScript, which is processed by the browser, you only just need to edit your file and then input the requested language. We also have documentation. Python is user-friendly enough to cater for beginner developers as well as people who are already in the development field, which makes it easier to get started as a beginner. The most stable version of Python is currently version 3.7. There are a lot more functionalities. There are also amazing third-party packages that have a wide range of function, for example, creating graphical user interfaces, text and image processing, scientific computing, system administration, databases, and more. Python is also gaining popularity with its involvement in data science, which is a prominent field in the computer industry. The link is provided as a resource below in this lecture, so you can have a look at this website and read more about Python. Let's deal with more amazing technologies next. In this final section, we'll be dealing with full-stack web development. Build the basics towards the section by discussing what front-end web development is, which involves developing the client-side part of the website, which the user will interact with on a daily basis, and then back-end web development, which involves creating the logic, the database connections, server configurations, retrieval of data that the client doesn't usually see, as all of this is usually converted to HTML and then just simply displayed. Full-stack web development is a combination of the front-end and back-end web development to have a fully dynamic website. You have to choose a technology stack based on the requirements of your website. Will your website be a static website? Will you have a dynamic website where people can post comments? Is it a blog? Is it a personal website? All these will help you determine the technologies to use for your particular project. In summary, the technologies that we discussed in this particular course involve front-end web development, where we discussed HTML, the core of your website, which you use to put elements on your website, CSS, the style sheet that you use to make your website look more presentable, adding background colors, spacing, margins, alignment, and more. Then we have JavaScript, which comes into play when you want to add more functionality to your website, particularly without having to refresh a particular page. It provides more interaction, advanced animations, and more. Then we have our backend web development, which involves PHP, the language we use to write scripts and usually to connect to databases, Python as well, MySQL, an example of a database that you can use to host information, our web service, our Apache, IIS, and more. Then finally, your full stack will comprise of any combination of the above front-end and back-end technologies, as well as the frameworks that are built on top of these technologies. You can use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, then use PHP to connect to your MySQL database. It's in rare cases that you'll find a vacancy saying that they want a full stack web developer. They usually just mention the technologies that you'll need to use. For example, we want a developer who's fluent in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. Now that you know that all those technologies, some fall under front end and some fall under back end, then you'll gladly know that they're actually looking for a full stack web developer. Thank you for enrolling and watching this course to completion. I hope you learned a lot of valuable information from this course regarding the web development stack, and you'll be able to apply your knowledge to get started with web development. In this course, we've discussed the technologies that you can use to develop your website, some information on the technologies, what you can achieve using them, and the latest versions, advantages, and more. Now you really want to get started and create that website, become hands-on with a bit of code, enroll for my course, Introduction to Responsive Web Design, HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap 4. In this course, we teach you how to add elements to your website, or some buttons, how to style them, text. We create a responsive website by using Bootstrap. Show you how to style your website. Deal with different layouts so that you can have an awesome looking website in no time. In just 4 hours, you'll be able to create a website like this one that I have open here. Enroll now and start learning these awesome features of website development and get your own personal website, blog, or whatever you want to create in no time. The link to the course is available in the resources section below.